Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about Dungeons & Dragons and Filmstruck. All right, the death of Filmstruck. All right, so what is Filmstruck? So Filmstruck is a new streaming service that came out in November 2016, okay? It is owned by Warner Media, which is associated with AT&T and Warner Brothers, multinational corporations. Filmstruck is a streaming service that streams classic films. The biggest, best collection of classic films on the planet. It has the Criterion Collection. It has like the majority of the best classic films, movies ever created. It is the most carefully curated, most carefully, restored films. Also Filmstruck, what did they do with this massive collection of classic films, right? Well, what they did was that, they made it available to their streamers, and then they also did three, and for streaming whenever they wanted it, right? They made sure it was a professional, good distribution platform, right? The streaming service. And in addition to that, right, they did micro lectures for many of the films to let you understand what the film was, to put it into context, to show the historical importance of the film, right? They did movie commentary on these films. They showed the films themselves, and they also did thematic programming, feature programming. Like, here's one weekend. On Saturday, you can watch these two Alfred Hitchcock movies. And on Sunday, you can watch these two different Alfred Hitchcock movies. And we're going to make it a special event. We're going to bring in stars to talk about it. And, they really did this right. They did it as good as you... They had the best classic films that money can buy, and they presented them in the best way, okay? Now, we're coming up on November 2018. That will be the 2-year anniversary of Filmstruck. Filmstruck dies. This was reported today. Filmstruck dies on November 2018. 2 years, right? So basically, you have the best, curated classic films possible. You put them up in a professional manner. You put them out for a good streaming price. You handle it professionally. You give micro lectures. You put them into context. You do commentary. Everything you could possibly do for these classic films. Nobody cares. At the macro level, nobody cares. Nobody bought it. And Warner Kent Brothers said, cut this noise out. We're done. Nobody wants to watch these old movies, right? Right? Doesn't matter how good they are. Doesn't matter what the quality is. Doesn't matter how carefully you curated the collection. Doesn't matter how well you presented it. Doesn't matter that you put it into context. Doesn't matter that you made sure it was a strong platform with a fair price. None of that matters. Nobody wants old. Nobody wants old. That's the lesson of Filmstruck, okay? Now, why does that matter for Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition? Well, for Dungeons & Dragons, the reason is 6th edition, right? I've been talking about this for a while, and I really believe that we found a new industry standard, okay? If you are a brick-and-mortar tabletop role-playing game, if you're made by a real company that has a real brick-and-mortar place where people put on their pants and their skirts and they go make tabletop role-playing games, and they got a 401k, right, and they drink their coffee every day making tabletop role-playing games like a real job, right, then, if you're making tabletop role-playing games at that level, there's a new understanding. In my opinion, every edition, every game cannot escape this new edition rule, right? Which is your edition has to last 5 years. If the current edition of your game does not last 5 years, then that means that you as a company screwed up, right? It is unreasonable to ask an entire community of fans to buy your game and then buy a brand new edition of that game less than 5 years later. So it has to last 5 years. It cannot go over 10. So the lifespan of a modern tabletop role-playing game, we know it now, it is between 5 and 10 years, right? So it can't be shorter than 5 years, but it must not be longer than 10 years. And the reason why is our world changes. And at the macro level, the people in our world absolutely demand new, fresh content, right? So, like, with the Criterion Collection, right, with these movies, you are looking at the best directors, that have ever lived had films in this. They had collected many of the films on the top 100 films that had come from, like, literally, that were called out by us, that had won Oscars and won the most awards. These were objectively amazing films, right? So you have the best historical films, these are fictional films, like the best films that have ever been made, right? All in one collection. And people are like, nope, give me that sweet new, season of Stranger Things. Give me that sweet new, Haunting on House Hill. Netflix has got my vote. I don't want to see your crusty old film, right? Like, and it didn't matter. The quality didn't matter. It didn't matter how they was presented. It didn't matter how much commentary you had on them. It didn't matter how much you put them into context. And I think it's the exact same with any tabletop role-playing game edition, and especially Dungeons and Dragons, right? That edition has got to last 5 years, and it better not go over 10 years, right? That's the reality. And so Filmstruck, the death of Filmstruck, is a continuation of the lesson that people do not want to see your crusty old content. They don't want crusty old editions on their games. They do not want old, right? They want new, fresh content that matches the culture of the day, that matches the politics of the day, that matches the society of the day, right? And the reality is, people today much prefer new over old. And frankly, Warner Brothers paid millions of dollars to learn this lesson. And we, as the TRPG community, one of the reasons why I'm talking about this today is we, as the TRPG community, need to get on board with this, right? And when new companies bring out a new edition, and it is 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, there should be no complaints, right? They need to do this. If they are not doing it, they are risking the health of their financial standing, and that means that their game can die. So, in my opinion, going forward, any company that lets a brick and mortars level, triple A TRPG go more than 10 years without a new edition, that is irresponsible. And you can, and I think you can bet, right, that you're going to be seeing a company that's going to be struggling financially. And I invite you to tell me editions that break this rule. An edition of a tabletop role-playing game where that game is growing, the company is robust, and it has an edition that's older than that is 10 years old or older. I don't think there's one on the entire market, right? And I know people are probably going to send me riffs, right? But I ain't seeing riffs getting played anywhere, right? Yes, Steve Jackson's Games is a lie, or is that who makes it? I think it is. Those games is, the creator of Rifts is certainly alive, but are they robust? Are they Palladium? Sorry. So Palladium makes them. Palladium's there, but are they growing? I don't know. I think there's a difference between thriving and subsisting. And I think companies like Palladium are subsisting. Same thing I would say with, actually, Steve Jackson Games makes sure that they have a fresh new copy of GURPS on the line as much as possible, so they don't really have that issue, right? So that's the issue is, one, I think we have a new understanding of how old an edition should be, and in addition to that, we as a community need to be ready to say, okay, listen, if you're flipping the edition on me on year 3 or 4, I'm going to thumb my nose at you, and I got every right to do it, right? But if you're flipping your edition on year 6, 7, 8, or 9, you are being financially responsible with the IPs you hold, the intellectual properties you hold, the games you hold. And we need to say, okay, I'm going to extend my goodwill to you because I know that even though I want this edition that I clutched in my breast, like that I love, that I want it to last 25 years, that's not financially responsible. And so we as a community need to accept that. That's my take, and my condolences to Warner Media on the death of Filmstruck. And, lessons got to get learned. At the macro level, people don't like gold. They want new, they want fresh, they want that new stuff. right? That's my take. Let me know what you think, and please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you.